So another week is quickly going by, and we're creeping up on Sunday, which means another weekly slate of NFL games, which means for the Bears, new week, new team, new matchup. This time they return to Soldier Field for their home opener of the 2020 season to take on Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and Joe Judge's New York Giants. Looking back at what happened at week one, it is the one thing that we have fresh in our mind is important not to overreact, I suppose, one way or another to what we saw last week. But you look at the Giants, they opened the Joe Judge era with a Monday night loss to the Steelers. Started off okay early on, but eventually some of the problems really started to creep in. Saquon Barkley had 15 carries for only 6 yards on the ground. That's not going to get it done ever. The offensive line really struggled against TJ Watt and Bud Dupree, specifically from Pittsburgh's front seven. And when you talk about that offense of the New York Giants, you had Dan Elijah Manning doing what he does. He can make some plays, and he will put the ball up for grabs. It's just the reality. So the Giants on week one looked like a bad football team. And to be fair, let's be clear, the Chicago Bears for the first 3 quarters of their game Sunday in Detroit looked like an abysmal football team. That defense was getting run over, and that offense couldn't do a damn thing. They were down 23-6 going into the fourth quarter. Now, when you got into the fourth quarter, of course, eventually what happened? Lions gonna Lions. Some of the injuries may have caught up with them a little bit, but Trubisky started to get in a little bit of better rhythm. As a result, the offense got in a better rhythm. They put up 3 touchdowns unanswered in the fourth quarter. Rookie DeAndre Swift's drop touchdown pass late in the game sealed the deal for Detroit and ultimately sealed the deal on the win for Chicago, and the Bears held off the Lions in what was best described as a crazy-ass game, 27-23. Now, when you look at these two teams heading into this game Sunday, we do have some recent history to go off of as they've played each other the past 2 years. Now, I know going back to 2018, that's a different time. It was specifically a different Giants team because you still had Eli Manning at the helm, but nonetheless, that's who was there at the time. Giants won that game, if you remember, back in 2018, 30-27 in overtime. Last year, they played again. It was Trubisky versus Daniel Jones, and neither one of them exactly lit the world on fire, but the Bears did enough to hold off the Giants and win 19-14. Going into this Week 2 matchup, probably the most notable injury for the Giants is Golden Tate being questionable. We'll see whether or not he's able to suit up. For the Chicago Bears as well, not a ton of injuries. Certainly not a ton of notable injuries outside of Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, both as of this recording on Friday night, are being listed as questionable. Khalil Mack played in week 1. He certainly got some pressure on Matthew Stafford. Didn't result in big plays from him, but they were without Robert Quinn, and certainly would be a nice boost to that Bears defense to be able to get Mack's running mate on the other side and Quinn on the field and playing in week 2, but we'll see what happens there. When you talk about this matchup and some of the keys to victory for each of these teams, I look at the New York Giants, and I say first and foremost, you got to get Saquon going on the ground early. And that might even mean that you get Saquon going in the passing game a little bit. You get him into the rhythm of a game a little bit by getting him a couple of running back screens, some throws out of the flat. Get the ball into his hands early, get him into the rhythm of the game early, which could also potentially help settle Daniel Jones in a little bit. When you talk about the Giants, when you have a running back that you took a couple of years ago with the number 2 overall pick, you can't have him getting 6 yards on 15 carries. So obviously for the Giants and what they've got on that offensive side of the ball, Saquon is a significantly sizable key to everything that they're going to do on offense. And as a result, they need him to play less like Le'Veon Bell. It's not all Le'Veon's fault either, to be fair. And they need him to be more like Christian McCaffrey here in week 2. Then when I think about that offense, I think about the Giants' passing game. Darius Slayton certainly had a good week 1, a good season opener, going over 100 yards. I think it was on 6 catches with 2 touchdowns. They got to attack Bears' second-round pick rookie Jalen Johnson on the outside with Darius Slayton early and often, or Sterling Shepard, or whoever ends up lining up opposite of Jalen Johnson. That's the place that you've got to attack. That's the place you've got to go after. Because if you can get after Johnson early on and you can get him uncomfortable, you can get him to lose some confidence, it could open up some things in that passing game. And When you look at trying to get your young quarterback comfortable and in the rhythm of the game, you want to be able to find something that he can go to, and it potentially could be there on Sunday. Daniel Jones, most importantly of all, I called him Dan Elijah Manning because a lot of Giants fans will get the reference here. He has those moments where he just reminds you of Eli. Just a really bad, dumb turnovers, putting the ball at risk. The reality is they've got to get him to avoid the bad plays and the turnovers. He's got to better protect the ball, cut out the fumbles, and stop making some of the bad throws that he makes. Because it can be hard for the Giants to sit there and get in a rhythm offensively when they have some really, really big plays and bad plays happen for them in the form of turnovers from their offense. And I think defensively, last week you look at that Monday night game, both Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence had a sack. Similar type of thing is going to be needed for that Giants defense up front in week 2. They're going to need to get some pressure inside and up the middle in the face of Trubisky early because Trubisky is not the most confident kid. He is not the most confident quarterback. And he struggles in the face of pressure. He absolutely does. And for a guy that already locks in way too often and too consistently into his primary target, he gets some pressure in his face, he's going to be scatterbrained and all over the place. So Giants have got to get some pressure and got to get some pressure consistently on Mitchell Trubisky if they have any shot of winning this game Sunday. For the Bears, I think similar to what they were doing in week number 1, similar type of offensive approach early on in terms of the running game and getting the running game going early. Going with David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen and Cordell Patterson, mixing it up and not being as predictable, but still trying to establish it and having some type of consistent rhythm with it. That Bears offensive line and the run blocking was really, really good in week number 1. You would like to see that continue because that's the type of thing that'll take a lot of pressure off of your quarterback. Defensively, you want to see them get to Daniel Jones early. And here's one of the things sometimes I hate about the analytics folks and the analytics approach to football. They'll talk about, well, Khalil Mack's getting held a lot. A lot of guys get held a lot. Let's just be clear. Then they're going to say, well, Khalil Mack gets a lot of pressure. He gets around the quarterback a lot. Yeah, that's cool, but at some point in time, close doesn't count. Like you can get pressure on a guy by being in his vicinity, but he can still get the pass away in time and potentially connect for some big plays. I'm not picking on Khalil Mack. I want to make that clear. Like it's a Bears defensive problem as a whole. Like you need to be able to actually get home at the quarterback more consistently. That's why I hate sometimes when I hear, oh, he got all these pressures. Yeah, pressures are nice, but pressures aren't the be-all, end-all. Just like sacks aren't the be-all, end-all. But at some point in time, if a guy has 6 pressures, you want him to be able to get home to the quarterback once or twice because pressure is one thing, but actually hitting the quarterback and hitting him early and getting him off his rhythm and getting him comfortable is an entirely different ball game right there. They got to get to Daniel Jones. For a younger quarterback coming off of an performance in week 1, you want to eliminate all doubt early. You want to make him understand that this is going to be a long day. Then you got to get Mitch involved in the flow of the game early. Let's be clear here. You're going to have a lot of revisionist Bears fans that pretend like the first 3 quarters of that game on Sunday did not happen, or they will come up with some really dumb spin about how Trubisky's performance was not that bad. He was bad. He sucked the first 3 quarters. He absolutely did. Stop kidding yourself. Stop fooling yourself. Give me a break. He's got to be able to come out and act like an NFL starting quarterback in the first half. That should not be too much to ask for as highly overdrafted as he was still the number 2 overall pick in the draft. You're in year 4, Junior. It's time to figure it out and put it together a little damn bit for crying out loud. Lord. Oh, Trubisky's great name. That's how low the standards are. It's just unbelievable. When I think about what I expect to happen in this game, I do think it is important to not overreact to what we saw in week 1. I think there are things you could glean from week 1. I think there are things you could certainly take away from week 1. When I look at the Giants, they're in trouble. They're likely to not be a good team this year. So what I expected out of them, before the season, what I saw in week 1 is what I expect to see out of them for the vast majority of the year. For the Bears, they got the win, but they're damn lucky they got the win. That's the reality. And what I saw in that game highlighted some of the concern areas that I had for this team going into this 2020 season. I don't see where Mitch was going to be dramatically better. And when you talk about, oh, he played better in the fourth quarter, yes, against a prevent defense, against a Lions defense that was missing 3 key members of their secondary. Give me a break. And especially once Desmond Trufant went out, the game was vastly different. Let's not overrate this too much. But more concerning to me was defensively. This is a Bears defense that gave up 23 points to the Lions in the first 3 quarters. Now, granted, they toughened up and tightened up a little bit in the fourth quarter, but they were having their lunch handed to them in the first 3 quarters. And even at the end of the game, DeAndre Swift was open somehow, dropped the pass that should have been a touchdown, that should have sealed the victory for the Lions, and it didn't happen. Let's not pretend like this Bears defense is dominant. Let's not pretend like this Bears defense is elite. They may end up becoming in the next few weeks as they get Quinn back into the fold and they get more rhythm. Defenses sometimes can struggle a little bit coming out of the gate, especially if you don't have much in the way of preseason action, which they certainly didn't this year. But this is not an elite unit, and people need to stop acting like it's an elite unit. That is something that you can glean out of week 1. If you didn't have any concerns or doubts coming out of 2019, like I did have doubts. I did have concerns. I've been talking about it. Week 1 should trouble you quite a bit. I just look at this and I say the Bears are just a better football team. They are. Like, even if you want to consider Trubisky and Jones a wash, which could potentially be fair, the Bears defense, while not elite, is still to me vastly better than the Giants defense. And when I look at the weapons that the Bears have on offense compared to what the Giants have on offense, I'll take the Bears all day long. This is one of these things, based on what I saw in week 1, I'm certainly not confident the Bears are going to get off to a great start, but I think home opener, Soldier Field, coming off of that lucky victory last week against Detroit, I think the Bears will come in and handle business in week 2. So I'm going to pick them to win Bears 20, Giants 14, and I can't wait to the overreactions on Twitter if the Bears win this game and go 2-0 to start the season. And we're going to be talking about playoffs, and we're going to talk about all these dumb things that, are not going to change the fact that this is just going to be a largely waste of time season for the Chicago Bears team. I'm just saying.